I used to think the most dangerous phrase in marriage was something dramatic. Something like, "We need to talk." Turns out, no. The real killer is, "I'm just staying a little later at work." Because apparently those 6 innocent little words are the gateway drug to chaos, lies, dating apps, and watching your wife discover she's apparently a free spirit at 32, with a Costco membership and a child who still needs help with math homework. My name's Evan. I'm 35. I work in commercial HVAC, which sounds boring because it is. If air conditioners ever get a Netflix documentary, society has officially collapsed. I've been married to my wife, Madeline, for 11 years. And before anybody asks, yes, we got married because she got pregnant. Not in some trashy reality show way. More like 2 20-somethings who thought, well, we love each other anyway, so let's make it work. And honestly, for a long time, it did work. We weren't miserable, nobody was throwing plates, nobody was sleeping on couches, nobody was screaming, "I hate you." We were just normal. We had routines, Friday takeout, Sunday grocery runs, movie nights where we both fell asleep 20 minutes in, because adulthood is basically just being tired in different rooms of the house. We had our son, Caleb. He was 10 now. Smart kid. Sarcastic already. Inherited that from me. God help him. Madeline used to love being home. Not in a 1950s housewife way. More like she liked cozy things. Candles, throw blankets, stupid crime documentaries. Then, around 6 months ago, something shifted. At first it was subtle. New clothes, not just normal shopping. I mean, suddenly our Amazon history looked like a Sephora executive had personally taken over my account. Workout outfits, matching sets, expensive makeup, perfume that smelled like financial mistakes. Then came the gym. Now listen, I'm not one of those guys who panics because his wife starts exercising. I didn't see leggings and suddenly turn into one of those paranoid husbands from Reddit. But this woman had spent 10 years saying, "I hate gyms. People there look like human anatomy charts." Then suddenly she's going 5 times a week. And the weirdest part? She started getting ready for the gym like she was auditioning for a music video. Full makeup, hair done, perfume. To go sweat in a room full of strangers carrying gallon jugs of radioactive-looking water. One evening I looked at her while she adjusted her hair in the hallway mirror. "You know you're going to the gym, not invading a small European country, right?" She smirked. "God forbid I want to look nice." "Oh no, by all means. If Planet Fitness has a king, I hope you win custody of him." She rolled her eyes and grabbed her bag. Back then, I still thought we were joking. That's the thing about marriages collapsing. Nobody plays horror music beforehand. Then came the work stuff. Late meetings, client dinners, quarterly reports. Madeline worked in marketing for a furniture company. I'm still not entirely sure what she actually did there. Every time she explained it, it sounded like corporate astrology. We're trying to reposition the brand identity emotionally. What does that mean? It's a couch, Madeline. People sit on it. Nobody needs an emotional journey with a sectional. But suddenly she was staying late constantly. And every time I questioned it, she had an answer ready immediately. Too ready. Like she'd rehearsed them in the car beforehand. One night she came home at almost 10. I was in the kitchen making Caleb lunch for school, because apparently children need nutrition and care. Madeline walked in smiling at her phone. Not normal smiling. That weird private smile people do when somebody's giving them attention they shouldn't be enjoying that much. I looked at her. "Good meeting?" She looked up too fast. "What?" "The meeting. Was it productive? Did you emotionally reposition a love seat?" She laughed, but it came out tight. "You're in a mood tonight." "No, I'm in sweatpants making dinosaur-shaped sandwiches at 10 p.m. This is actually my peak." She kissed my cheek quickly and headed upstairs. And she took her phone with her. That sounds stupid, but married people understand. Phones develop personalities during affairs. Before, her phone lived everywhere. Kitchen counters, couch cushions. Sometimes I found it in the fridge like it had given up on life. Now, That thing never left her hand. Screen down constantly. Face ID enabled. Volume muted. Bathroom trips with the phone. Shower trips with the phone. I'm surprised she didn't baptize the damn thing. One Saturday morning, I caught her taking selfies in the living room while Caleb and I were building a Lego set. Not normal selfies either. The casually trying too hard kind. Head tilted, soft smile, hair touch. I watched silently for a few seconds. Then I said, "If this is for LinkedIn, corporate America has changed dramatically." She jumped slightly. "You scared me. You're photographing cereal in natural lighting. I think we passed normal behavior 20 minutes ago." She locked the phone, too fast again. That tiny movement, that tiny panicked movement. People think suspicion starts with huge moments. It doesn't. It starts with tiny interruptions in rhythm. A half second too fast. A smile cut short. A phone turned over. That's the real beginning, not the cheating, the instinct. A few days later, I was at work when my friend Marcus called me. Marcus had been divorced twice, which meant he now spoke about relationships like a war veteran. "You busy?" he asked. "I'm dangling from a rooftop unit in 90-degree heat. So emotionally? Yes." "You ever think Maddie's acting weird lately?" That got my attention. "Why?" "I saw her downtown Thursday." My stomach tightened slightly. "With coworkers?" "I don't know. She was with some guy." There it was. The moment. The tiny little click inside your chest where your brain quietly says, "Oh no." But pride is a funny thing. You don't want to sound paranoid. So I shrugged even though he couldn't see me. Probably work. Maybe. The way he said maybe bothered me all day. That night I watched her carefully at dinner. She looked beautiful. That annoyed me. Not because she looked good, because suddenly I realized she'd started looking good for the world again, not for us. There's a difference. People in long marriages understand that too. At one point, Caleb started talking about a kid at school eating glue. Madeline laughed. Actually laughed. Big, genuine laugh. And I had this horrible realization. I hadn't heard that laugh in months. Not with me, anyway. Later that night, she fell asleep on the couch while scrolling her phone. The TV was playing some baking competition. I sat there for a while pretending to watch it. Then her phone buzzed. Once. She didn't wake up. I looked down automatically. And there it was. A message preview. Unknown number. Can't stop thinking about your lips. My entire body went cold. Like all the air had suddenly left the room. I stared at the screen for maybe 5 seconds. Long enough for my brain to desperately try inventing explanations. Maybe joke. Maybe spam. Maybe... No. No grown man texts that accidentally. I slowly picked up the phone, and for the first time in 11 years of marriage, I unlocked it. Her password was still the same. I unlocked the phone, and immediately wished I hadn't. You know what people imagine when they think they'll catch their spouse cheating? One dramatic conversation, one secret lover, one devastating reveal. No, reality is uglier. The first thing I saw was Instagram. Nothing obvious there. Then Snapchat. Again, mostly clean, too clean. Like a hotel room after housekeeping has hidden the evidence but forgot the smell. Then I found the dating apps. Plural is a horrifying word when you're married. Not one app. Several. Tinder, Bumble, something called Pure. I stared at the screen thinking, wow. My wife apparently has a part-time job I knew nothing about. My hands were ice cold. I opened Tinder first. Her profile picture was recent, very recent. That black dress she told me she bought just because it was on sale. Right. The bio said, Mom, coffee addict, trying to enjoy life again. That smiley face almost sent me into cardiac arrest. Like she'd escaped some tragic past instead of living in a 4-bedroom suburban house with a husband who unclogged toilets and packed school lunches. I kept scrolling. Messages. Dozens. Different men. Different conversations. And the thing that messed me up wasn't even the flirting. It was how adaptable she was. With one guy, she was sweet. With another, she was sarcastic. With another, she acted shy. It was like watching somebody try on personalities. Then I found the gym guy. Of course there was a gym guy. There's always a gym guy. Human civilization could collapse tomorrow, and somewhere in the ashes there'd still be a dude named Braden explaining protein powder to somebody's wife. This guy's name was Tyler. His profile picture looked exactly how you imagine. Tank top, perfect beard, the expression of a man who's taken at least one mirror selfie in a public restroom. Their messages were recent. Tyler, you looked incredible tonight. Madeline, oh, stop it. Tyler, nah, seriously, that blue set should be illegal. Then, Tyler, wish we didn't have to leave so early. Madeline, me too. I stared at that winking face for so long, I think part of my soul detached from my body and filed a complaint. Then another message. Different guy. This one older. Daniel. Divorced. Financial advisor. Profile picture with a boat because apparently divorced men legally have to obtain one. Their conversation was completely different. More sophisticated. Wine places, restaurants, inside jokes. At one point he said, "You deserve to be appreciated." And Madeline replied, "You have no idea how long it's been since I felt seen." That one hit harder than the flirting, because now I wasn't just competing with men. I was competing with the fictional version of herself she'd created around them. Then came the third guy. And honestly, that one pissed me off the most. Not because he was impressive. His name was Aiden. 24 years old. I'm pretty sure my back pain is older than him. His entire profile looked like he smelled faintly of vape juice and bad decisions. And yet there she was, laughing, flirting, sending selfies. At one point he wrote, "You don't act married." And she answered, "Sometimes I forget I am." That one physically hurt. Like genuinely. I had to put the phone down for a second, not because I was sad. Because my body suddenly realized my marriage was apparently being held together by drywall screws and denial. I sat there in silence while the TV kept playing cheerful British baking music in the background. That contrast almost made me laugh. Some woman was crying because her sponge cake collapsed while my entire life was detonating 3 feet away. Madeline shifted slightly on the couch. I froze, but she stayed asleep. And for one ugly second, I looked at her differently, not like my wife, like a stranger wearing my wife's face. That's a horrifying feeling. I kept digging. Bad idea. Never keep digging. There is no treasure at the bottom of betrayal. Only more betrayal. Photos. Nothing fully explicit. But enough. Mirror selfies. Gym locker room shots. Pictures clearly taken in our bathroom while I was downstairs helping Caleb with homework. One photo she'd sent Tyler showed the tiny scar near her hip. I knew that scar. She got it falling off a bike when we were 23, and suddenly I realized some random gym idiot now knew my wife's body in pieces, in fragments. That thought made me feel violent. I locked the phone and leaned back slowly. My heart was pounding so hard I could hear it. You ever have one of those moments where your brain desperately tries to negotiate with reality? Like, maybe this isn't real, maybe there's context, maybe no. No context exists for, sometimes I forget I'm married. That's not confusion, that's auditioning for a new life. I looked over at Madeline again, still asleep, still peaceful. That annoyed me irrationally, because I was sitting there psychologically disemboweled while she slept like a Disney princess after ruining somebody's mental health. Around 1 in the morning, I finally stood up. And this is important. I didn't wake her up screaming. I didn't throw the phone. I didn't start some dramatic midnight confrontation. I put the phone back exactly where it was. Then I went upstairs, and I didn't sleep at all. Instead, I sat in the dark in our bedroom replaying the last 6 months like some kind of emotionally damaged detective. The gym, the clothes, the selfies, the late meetings. Jesus Christ, the meetings. At around 3 in the morning, I started laughing quietly. Not happy laughing. The kind where your brain temporarily malfunctions. Because suddenly I remembered a conversation from 2 months earlier. Madeline had come home late wearing that blue workout set Tyler apparently considered a federal crime. I'd looked at her and joked, "Who are you trying to impress?" And she smiled, then said, "Maybe myself." I remember kissing her forehead after that, like an idiot. The next morning she acted completely normal. That was terrifying too. She stood in the kitchen making coffee while Caleb argued with his backpack zipper like it had personally betrayed him. Madeline looked at me. "You okay? You look tired." Wow, amazing. 10 out of 10 performance. Oscar-worthy concern from the woman running 3 simultaneous side quests through my marriage. I took a sip of coffee. "Didn't sleep great." She frowned sympathetically. "You should probably take care of yourself more." That almost made me laugh directly into the toaster. Instead, I just nodded slowly. Then she walked over and kissed me. And for the first time in 11 years, I had to stop myself from pulling away. The next few days were weird. No dramatic confrontations. No shattered glasses. No, "How could you do this to me?" speeches in the rain. Just this quiet, suffocating tension, where one person knows the marriage is bleeding out, and the other is still casually asking if you remembered to buy orange juice. That's the ugly phase nobody talks about. The undercover phase. And Madeline? Madeline was thriving. That part nearly drove me insane. She seemed lighter lately, happier. She hummed while cooking, started dancing a little when music came on, took selfies in sunlight like she was legally sponsored by serotonin. Meanwhile, I was one inconvenience away from becoming a documentary narrator. One afternoon, Caleb asked, "Dad, why do you keep staring into space like Batman?" That one hurt because he was completely right. I had become Gotham's saddest electrician. I started noticing everything now, every little detail. Once you discover betrayal, your brain basically turns into a forensic lab run by insomnia. One Thursday evening, she came downstairs wearing jeans I hadn't seen before. Tight black top, hair curled, perfume. She looked incredible. And I hated that my first thought was, "Who is this for?" She grabbed her keys casually. "I'm probably going to be late tonight. We're reviewing campaign concepts with a client." I nodded. "What kind of client?" She blinked once. Too slow. "What?" "The client." "Oh, regional." I leaned against the counter. "You know, for somebody in marketing, your fake work stories could use more creativity." She froze slightly. Tiny movement, but I caught it. Then she laughed. "You're being weird lately." "No, I'm being observant. Different hobby." She gave me that look spouses give when they're trying to decide whether you know something. Then she walked over and kissed my cheek. That tiny forced affection people use like relationship Fabrizi. "I'll be home before midnight." Before midnight. Fantastic. Very comforting timeline for a married woman. After she left, I sat in silence for maybe 30 seconds. Then Caleb walked into the kitchen holding a granola bar. "Mom going somewhere?" "Work." He looked toward the driveway. "She dressed like that for work?" "Kids notice everything." I shrugged. "Maybe the couches are getting fancy." He snorted and walked away. I waited exactly 7 minutes before grabbing my keys. Now before anyone starts acting morally superior in the comments, yes, I followed my wife. And honestly, some of you would have followed her in a helicopter. I stayed 3 cars behind her because apparently betrayal turns ordinary men into discount FBI agents. At first, she drove toward downtown. Then she passed downtown. Then she turned toward Riverside. No offices there, just restaurants, bars, apartments. My stomach tightened. She finally parked outside this trendy wine place that charged $18 for appetizers designed to insult hungry people. And then I saw him. Daniel. Boat guy. He was already standing outside waiting for her. Tall. Gray at the temples. Expensive jacket. The kind of guy who definitely says things like, "Let's discuss investment opportunities over sea bass." Madeline got out smiling. Not polite smiling, not coworker smiling. That soft, excited smile people get when they want to be seen. He kissed her cheek. His hand stayed on her waist slightly too long. And there it was. Proof. Real proof. Not messages. Not suspicion. Reality. I expected rage. Instead, I just sat there gripping the steering wheel thinking, wow, she really did this. Like somehow part of me still believed she'd stop before it became real. Like maybe the apps were fantasy. But no. She had crossed the line so casually it almost looked routine. I watched them go inside together. And then something genuinely pathetic happened. I started comparing myself to him. That's how broken male brains are. His jacket, his watch, his posture. Meanwhile, I was sitting in a pickup truck with enough loose screws on the floor to build a second pickup truck. At one point, I caught my reflection in the windshield and actually laughed. Because this entire situation suddenly felt absurd. Some financial advisor was taking my wife to wine bars while I had spent that morning arguing with a thermostat in an elementary school ceiling. What a beautiful system. I stayed there for nearly 40 minutes, long enough to see them through the restaurant window laughing. She looked alive, interested. I hadn't seen that expression directed at me in a very long time. At one point, she touched his arm while laughing. That tiny little touch. I drove home before they came out. Not because I was scared, because I suddenly realized something important. I wasn't going to confront her yet, not until I knew everything. By the time Madeline got home, Caleb was asleep and I was on the couch watching basketball badly enough to qualify as emotional self-harm. She walked in around 10:30. "Oh, you're not sleeping yet." I muted the TV. "How was the regional client?" No hesitation this time. "Exhausting. Interesting. Apparently lying gets easier with repetition." She kicked off her heels. "You ever have one of those nights where people just won't stop talking?" I stared at her for 2 full seconds. The irony nearly killed me. Then I nodded slowly. "Yeah, recently actually." She narrowed her eyes slightly. "You sure you're okay?" "Nope." That caught her off guard. "What does that mean?" "It means I'm 35, my knees sound like microwave popcorn every morning, and apparently everybody around me's developing secret personalities. So no, Maddie, I'm not fantastic." She laughed awkwardly. "You're in such a strange mood lately." And there it was again. That sentence. Like my behavior was the unusual thing happening in this house. She came over and sat beside me, close enough for me to smell her perfume. And underneath it, wine. I looked at her quietly. "You know what's funny?" "What?" "If you told 23-year-old me that one day we'd become boring suburban parents." She smiled slightly. "I know. We used to be fun." No, that wasn't the problem. She was grieving youth like it had been stolen from her instead of simply passing like it does for every human being on Earth. But I didn't say that. Instead, I smiled faintly. "Yeah, guess we did. The second time I followed her, I almost didn't go. That's the stupid thing about betrayal. Even after evidence, your brain still tries negotiating. Maybe the first time was the only time. Maybe she'll stop. Maybe she panicked. Human beings can rationalize absolutely anything. But then, Saturday happened. Madeline was suddenly very invested in self-care weekends. Around noon, she came downstairs wearing gray leggings and an oversized hoodie. Minimal makeup this time, hair tied back. Casual, too casual. Like somebody intentionally trying to look unintentionally attractive. "I'm heading to the gym for a bit," she said. "For a bit" had recently become one of the most dangerous phrases in my marriage. I looked up from the couch. "Cardio or emotional rebirth today?" She rolled her eyes. "You know, normal people don't make sarcastic comments every 30 seconds. Normal people also don't need perfume for squats. Yet here we are evolving together." That got a reaction, tiny but visible. And that's when I started realizing something interesting. Madeline wasn't fearless. She was nervous, not guilty nervous, caught nervous. like she could feel the atmosphere changing but didn't know how much I knew. She grabbed her gym bag. "I'll be back in a couple hours. Tell Tyler I said hi." The silence after that sentence was incredible. She froze. Then she turned slowly. "What?" I looked at her calmly. "What?" "You said Tyler." "Did I?" "Yes." "Huh." I shrugged. "Maybe there's a Tyler at the gym. Feels statistically likely." For about 3 seconds I genuinely thought she might confess. Instead, she forced a laugh. "You're being paranoid." I smiled slightly. "Nah, if I was paranoid, I'd start checking your phone." She stared at me another second, then left. The second the garage door closed, my expression dropped completely. Caleb walked into the living room holding his Nintendo Switch. "You two fighting?" "Nope." He looked unconvinced. "You both do that weird smiling thing." Children are terrifying little investigators. I muted the TV. "Hey buddy, wanna go get burgers later? Can I get onion rings?" "You ask that like I've denied you joy your entire childhood." "Mom says onion rings are pointless." I stared toward the garage. "Your mother's made several questionable decisions lately." 20 minutes later, I was back in my truck. At this point, my pickup probably deserved partial custody in the divorce. Madeline did go to the gym. For exactly 38 minutes. I know because I sat across the street drinking terrible gas station coffee while reevaluating every life choice that led me here. Then Tyler arrived. Madeline came out smiling. She got into his car, and they left. I followed. At this point, if the CIA ever needs a middle-aged HVAC guy with unresolved emotional trauma, I'm available Tuesdays and Thursdays. They drove toward the lake. They parked near a walking trail. And then I got to experience one of the strangest moments of my life, watching my wife flirt from 30 yards away like I was studying wildlife footage. She looked younger around him. That's what bothered me most. Not prettier, younger, like she'd stepped backward into another version of herself. They walked side by side laughing. At one point, Tyler nudged her shoulder and she shoved him lightly back. Playful, comfortable. I suddenly realized I hadn't seen her act playful with me in years, because somewhere along the way, I became associated with responsibility. Bills, school pickups, leaky sinks, mortgage payments. And Tyler? Tyler got the fun version. Of course he did. Men like Tyler always get the fun version. They show up after the hard years are already over. Like emotional tourists. At one point they sat near the water. Too close. Not technically inappropriate. But married people know. There's a distance people keep when they belong to someone else. And that distance was gone. I watched Tyler say something that made Madeline laugh hard enough to lean into him. Then he touched her thigh, just briefly. She didn't move his hand. That was the moment my anger finally arrived. I almost got out of the truck. For 1 second I pictured walking over there. But I stopped myself. Because anger is expensive in divorce court. And I wasn't going to be the idiot who lost leverage because my emotions wanted a dramatic scene by the water. So instead, I took pictures. A lot of pictures. Tyler's hand. Her leaning into him. The way she smiled at him. That smile. God, I started hating that smile. By the time I got home, I already knew something terrifying. I was no longer trying to save my marriage. I was investigating it. Madeline came home around 4, carrying a smoothie. She walked into the kitchen smiling. "You guys eat yet?" Caleb looked up from the table. "Dad said we were waiting for you." I hadn't said that. But apparently my son was already trying to keep the family glued together with elementary school optimism. Madeline smiled softly. Then she kissed the top of Caleb's head. I watched that quietly. And for the first time since all this started, I felt genuinely sad. Because she loved him. That was real. That's what makes situations like this so ugly. Bad people are easier to leave. But Madeline wasn't some cartoon villain. She was a selfish person chasing feelings while pretending she wasn't destroying the people around her. Which, honestly, might be worse. That night after Caleb went upstairs, she sat beside me on the couch. You've been distant lately. I almost laughed directly into the wall. My wife was collecting men like streaming subscriptions, and I was the emotionally unavailable one. I muted the TV slowly. You ever think people can outgrow each other? She looked surprised. Where is this coming from? Just answer. She hesitated. You're acting strange, Evan. No, Maddie. I looked directly at her. For the first time in months, I think I'm actually paying attention. Madeline crossed her arms. What is your problem lately? My problem? Yes, Evan. You've been sarcastic, cold, weird. Weird? I looked at her. Maddie, you've been coming home smelling like restaurants I can't afford while smiling at your phone like it contains the cure for unhappiness. Her face changed instantly. There it is, she said quietly. There what is? The accusations. I leaned back against the counter. You know what's funny? Innocent people usually ask what they're being accused of first. Silence. Heavy silence. Then she shook her head. You've been paranoid for weeks. No, I've been observant for weeks. Huge difference. She grabbed a glass from the cabinet harder than necessary. You checked my phone, didn't you? There it was. Not denial, not outrage over false accusations, just anger at being caught. I nodded once. Yes. She stared at me in disbelief. That is such a violation of privacy. I almost admired the confidence. Honestly, my wife was juggling 3 men and still trying to win the moral high ground like an Olympic event. A violation of privacy? I repeated. Madeline, you're on dating apps like you're collecting airline miles. You had no right. I had every right. No, you didn't. I'm allowed to have space. Space? I barked a laugh. Most people buy plants or get bangs. You started a romantic cinematic universe. She looked away. I lowered my voice. How long? She stayed quiet. How long, Madeline? Finally, she whispered. It's not what you think. That sentence should legally allow husbands to leave conversations immediately. You think this is easy for me? She snapped. You know what wasn't easy? I said quietly. Working 60-hour weeks so we could afford this house while you figured out which guy made you feel 22 again. She stood up suddenly. You don't understand what it's been like for me. She wrapped her arms around herself. I married you too young. I never got to enjoy freedom. Silence. I just looked at her. And suddenly all the memories flashed through my head differently. Our apartment, our wedding, holding Caleb in the hospital. Meanwhile, apparently my wife had been mentally filing all of it under things that ruined my youth. Then she said the part that truly killed something inside me. I went from being somebody's girlfriend to somebody's wife and mother before I even figured out who I was. I didn't answer immediately, because honestly, that hurt more than the cheating. The cheating was betrayal. This was regret. Regret attached to my name, to our son, to our entire life. I stared at her for a long moment. You know what's amazing? I said finally. What? For 11 years, I thought we were building a life together. My voice stayed calm. Too calm. But apparently you've been serving a sentence. After that conversation, something in me just stopped fighting for us. Madeline cried that night, said she was confused, said she lost herself. Maybe some of it was true. But explanations stop mattering once your wife starts scheduling other men between gym sessions and fake work meetings. The next morning, I called a lawyer. The hardest part was telling Caleb. He sat there quietly while Madeline cried beside him. Then he looked at us and asked, "Are you guys getting divorced because you don't love each other anymore?" And that question hit harder than anything else in this entire mess. Because I did love her. That was the problem. I just couldn't trust her anymore. A week later, I handed her the divorce papers in the kitchen. No dramatic speech, just an envelope sliding across the counter. Madeline didn't destroy our marriage because she hated me. She destroyed it because she spent years romanticizing the life she thought she missed. The freedom, the attention, the excitement. And eventually, she convinced herself she deserved to experience all of it, even if it cost her family. A month later, she moved into an apartment across town. Tyler disappeared almost immediately. Apparently, relationships built between gym selfies and locker room flirting don't have strong foundations. Daniel stopped answering her too, and Aiden looked exactly like the kind of guy who forgets birthdays, jobs, and occasionally basic human responsibility. Meanwhile, I stayed in the house with Caleb. It was quieter, lonelier sometimes, but peaceful. And one night while sitting alone on the back patio, I realized something important. I hadn't lost my wife to another man. I lost her to the fantasy of a life she thought marriage stole from her. And no husband can compete with a fantasy that only gets better in someone's head over time. If you felt this story hit hard, drop a like, subscribe for more, and share your thoughts in the comments. Your support keeps Steelheart beating.